ओ यहाँ तो नहीं हो रहा। फेसबुक का पासवर्ड बदल गया शायद। आयशा तुम्हारे उस पे वो आया है रिकॉर्डिंग का?
हाँ मेरे पास आया है रिकॉर्डिंग का मैसेज।
I think I changed the password, so I can't figure that out right now. So we'll forget the Facebook right now. Recording has started. So friends, I welcome all of you on behalf of Anhad. अनहद की तरफ से आप सबका बहुत बहुत स्वागत है आज के डिस्कशन में। जो आप सभी जानते हैं, जो हाइडनबर्ग एक्सपोजे हुआ, तो हम जितने भी लोग हैं, कम से कम अनहद में हम लोग एक्सपर्ट्स नहीं हैं इसके, और हम बहुत डीपली समझना चाह रहे थे कि इसके इम्प्लीकेशंस क्या है मुल्क के लिए, ऑर्डिनरी सिटीजन्स के लिए, हमारी इकोनॉमी के लिए। तो हमने सोचा कि हम ये एक ऑनलाइन डिस्कशन कर लें। और अनहद ने खास तौर से अडानी और मोदी जी का बहुत करीब रिश्ता देखा है, क्योंकि हमने 2003 से और 2014 तक बहुत एक्टिवली काम किया है गुजरात में। 2013 में हमने 10 साल पहले हमने कच्चा चिट्ठा नाम से कई चीजें रिलीज की थी, जिसमें जिस तरह ब्लेटेंटली जमीनें दी जा रही थी सारे रूल्स फ्लाउट करके। तो अभी जो पूरे नेशनल लेवल पे हो रहा है उसका एक पूरा एक्सपेरिमेंट तो वहां हो चुका था। बहरहाल आज इस सबको समझने के लिए हमारे पास बहुत ही एक अच्छा पैनल है। चेयर कर रहे हैं प्रोफेसर दीपांशु मोहन, जो डायरेक्टर हैं सेंटर फॉर न्यू इकोनॉमिक स्टडीज जिंदल स्कूल ऑफ लिबरल आर्ट्स के। Professor Arun Kumar, he's a former professor of economics, JNU, and Paranjoy Guha Thakurta, journalist, writer, publisher, documentary filmmaker, and he has done huge amount of work also on Adani. So welcome all of you again, and over to Deepanshu. मैंने अभी सबको म्यूट कर दिया है। सबके बोलने के बाद जब क्वेश्चन आंसर सेशन शुरू होगा, then we will unmute everyone so that people can ask questions. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Shabnam ji, and welcome everyone. It's an absolute honor, I must say, to be part of this gathering, because ऐसा कम होता है जब academic scholars को भी एक मौका मिले engage करने का with the wider community, particularly across civil society, those organizations who have been part working on the ground in so many different interventions. And again, also it's a pleasure to be part of a discussion which has Paranjoy ji and Professor Arun Kumar. It's absolute pleasure. So I want to give as much as time as possible, and मैं हिंदी और इंग्लिश दोनों में संवाद को ओपन रखूंगा. And Paranjoy ji, I think you're going to largely address in English, and Arun sir as
मैं दोनों भाषा
जैसे भी whatever is comfortable.
हिंदी अंग्रेजी दोनों भाषा में.
बिल्कुल.
दीपांशु, just 1 second. प्रोफेसर अरुण कुमार, अगर आप वीडियो अपना शुरू कर दें तो मैं हाईलाइट पे डाल दूं. आई थिंक यू हैव स्टार्टेड नाउ.
Yeah. Okay, so just to briefly introduce our panelists for everyone who has joined in. Professor Arun Kumar is a well-known economist, as a lot of you would know. He's country's leading authority on the black economy. Most of us as students have been able to learn and understand through the working of the unorganized black economy through his work. He's written, studied, and lectured extensively on this subject for nearly 4 decades. He was educated at Delhi University, Jawaharlal University, and Princeton University, and he's taught economics at JNU for 3 decades and retired in 2015. His focus area includes public finance, development economics, public policy, and macroeconomics. And his work has been published widely in all of these areas, but both in popular press and academic journals. He's currently the Malcolm Adiseshiah Chair Professor at the Institute of Social Sciences, New Delhi. Paranjoy Guha Thakurta, as most of you would know, is someone whose career has spanned over around 4 decades. His professional career started in June 1977, as a print journalist. His work experience spanning 4.5 decades cuts across different mass media aspects: the written word, the spoken word, the audio-visual medium, printed publications. He's a writer, speaker, anchor, interviewer, teacher, publisher, producer, director, and consultant. Much of his work is in 3 languages: English, Bengali, which is also his mother tongue, and Hindi. In particular, he examines the allocation and pricing of natural resources, the working of crony capitalism and oligarchies, a point of great contention, which we hope we are able to reflect on during the scope of this discussion, and mass communications in India. He teaches and speaks on these subjects to students, general audiences, and we welcome you, Paranjoy ji and Professor Arun Kumar. What I'll do is I'll just give a very quick sort of a summary to what's really been happening. And this is just for the audience who've sort of not really, I think taken a sense of what's been happening over the last week or 2 weeks. So Adani Group's, wars began on January 25 when Hindenburg Research, a US firm that conducts what technically we can call as forensic financial research, released a report accusing the Adani conglomerate of serious malfeasance, from allegations around money laundering to a number of issues where it had accused Adani of illegally using offshore investment funds and accounting fraud to boost its share prices and group earnings. Now, what happened as a result of the release of the report was that so far Adani Group has lost over 9 lakh crore. Some of its stocks have crashed up to 35%, which is a brutal sell-off. Hindenburg itself has a reputation of being an activist, short seller. It borrows the securities of companies it believes that are overvalued because of alleged wrongdoing and anticipating that the price will fall. And over a period of time, it sells these securities, hoping to buy back them later at a smaller price. Now, what's really happened is in the Indian economy's context, particularly in the financial markets, without even betting a single dollar in the Indian market, a short seller from New York has managed to almost torpedo the country's most prestigious share sale. And as most of you know, Adani Group was preparing for a FPO just a couple of days before the report came in. And that's, in a certain sense, the scape of financial globalization in the world we are living in. How in a matter of a week, a country can see one of its largest firms a decline to its stock market value to this sort of proportion. But there are larger implications, which is why this, I think, discussion is very important. There are bigger questions on the role of the domestic institutional regulatory sector in India. Politically, there are a lot of questions which really allowed Adani Group to make the kind of money it did. Economically, what does it mean generally for the relationship between the Indian state, that is the nation state, and the big private capital scenario? And socially, what does this mean for the average citizen who has struggled in the last 2-3 years while Adani conglomerate made most of its money? So with that, I'd like to get Paranjoy ji first to talk a little bit about his own experience of sort of looking at the conglomerate, but maybe in the scope of his comments and reflections, talk about the relationship between the state, big private capital, role of what you think about the regulator, SEBI has been in this, the charges levied by Hindenburg against the Adani Group. And we'll come back to more from Professor Arun Kumar on the economic implications.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Anahad. Thank you, Professor Deepanshu Mohan. Stop using G after my name. And thank you, Professor Arun Kumar. How long do you want me to speak?
I think the time which was assigned, 15 minutes is what we said. Right. So I can give you, before a minute, I can give you a sense.
All right. So if you can just interrupt me a few minutes before I'm supposed to wind up, I'll appreciate that. Okay. Before I talk about my own experience, and I'm the only journalist who's been named in that Hindenburg report, which runs into 32,000 words. I also happen to be the only Indian citizen against whom lawyers representing corporate entities that are headed by Shri Gautam Adani has currently instituted 6 cases of defamation that are pending in different courts of law in Gujarat, in Delhi, in Rajasthan. So I will relate my personal experiences. But before I do so, let me answer the second part of your question first. I do believe that the nexus between big business and politics is neither new nor unique to India. It's there in varying measures across the world. In India too, you can go back from the 40s to the time to more recently, or all the way up to the new millennium. And there's always been a nexus between business and politics. Now, there are various reasons for this, and this is a subject of a deeper discussion on some other occasion. But one of the main reasons for it is the opaque systems of political funding. That's one of the reasons. But let me make a different argument. I would argue that never before in the history of India has one corporate group exercised so much control and so much dominance over so many sectors and segments of the Indian economy, in particular, its infrastructure. I don't think whether it be the Tatas, the Birlas, or the Ambanis, or anybody else, ever wielded this kind of a control. I'll just give you a list, and I do not know if everybody is aware. In a few minutes, I'll give you the list of areas in which the Adani Group is dominant, not just in India, but it has a presence in different parts of the world. Let's start with Mundra. Mundra is the biggest special economic zone in India. Mundra is the biggest privately operated seaport in India. It is also the port in India which handles the maximum amount of container traffic. The biggest port in India remains the JNPT, or the Jawaharlal Nehru Port Trust, which is in Nhava Sheva near Mumbai. But Mundra, as a private port, deals with more container traffic today than JNPT. The group, I mean, Mundra is not just the biggest special economic zone. It was, Mr. Adani acquired the first bit of land there when the Congress was in power, when Keshubhai Patel was the chief minister. But the expansion of these SEZ has been amazing in the recent past, particularly after Mr. Modi became the chief minister of Gujarat in 2001, and after he became the prime minister in 2014. Now I want to make, today the Mundra Group is this big, the Adani Group, I stand corrected, operates a dozen seaports and inland container terminals in the country. Literally, it's the west coast and the east coast of this country. It is his string of jewels. Many of you have heard about China's string of pearls or string of jewels that extends all the way from the Horn of Africa to the South China Sea. Now, some of these projects are still under construction at different levels. Mr. Adani's group also today operates the second largest port in Israel, Haifa. It operates a major terminal in Colombo. It also has the Abbott Point terminal, which is linked to its coal project, which is in Queensland in Australia. This is ports. Let's come to airports. The Adani Group operates half a dozen airports, and the 7th one is under construction at Navi Mumbai in Mumbai. How it acquired control over the Mumbai airport is a different story altogether, so I'll leave that for another occasion. This is as far as logistics are concerned, because with the port, there are also related infrastructure, including railway lines, which are important. The Adani Group runs what is arguably the most unique project of its kind anywhere in the world. It imports coal from Australia and Indonesia. It's shipped to Dhamra port in Orissa, where it's taken by the railways to Godda in Jharkhand, from where it's exported, the electricity is exported across West Bengal to Bangladesh. Now, there is no other project of its kind. It's a separate matter that this project there is a certain controversy around this project. I can elaborate on that on another occasion. But let me quickly point out that this is only as far as logistics is concerned. It has attempted to acquire the Container Corporation of India, the public sector. It hasn't yet. Let me come now to another area, and that's energy. The Adani Group is the single biggest importer of coal to India. The Adani Group, including coal from Australia, coal from the mines that it controls in Indonesia. The Adani Group is the biggest miner of coal in India after Coal India Limited. They're called MDOs, Mine Development and Operate, mine developers and operators. It's the biggest. Coal India Limited is, of course, bigger. It is the biggest generator of electricity in India in the private sector, and the second largest after the public sector, National Thermal Power Corporation. It's also the biggest player in putting together solar power equipment and generating solar energy and also wind energy. So renewables, it's big in renewables also. So whenever it is pointed out, Mr. Adani, you are a big propagator of dirty coal. He said, no, I'm also the biggest generator of renewable electricity from renewable sources. It's the biggest transmitter of electricity. It is also the biggest distributor of electricity. It became the biggest after it acquired the BSES, the erstwhile Bombay Suburban Electric Supply, which was earlier controlled by the Anil Dhirubhai Ambani Group. So this is not all. It is the biggest supplier of gas to cities after Indraprastha Gas, which is a public sector organization. This is energy. Let's move on. Let's look at food. The Adani Group is the biggest supplier of apples to India. In India, it imports those apples. It also gets these apples from orchard owners in Himachal Pradesh, the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir, etc. It is the biggest supplier of edible oils to India. It has a tie-up with a Malaysian company called Wilmar. It's a conglomerate. It imports very large quantities of unrefined palm oil from both Indonesia and Malaysia and refines them there. And the Fortune brand, actually, which is Fortune brand is the brand which is the Adani Wilmar brand. It is dominant. It has a dominant market position. Its market share varies between 25% and 33% in different geographies across India. In terms of food, there is another story about that. After the Food Corporation of India, it provides the biggest services in terms of bulk storage of grains, essentially wheat and rice. Now it is there in other food products as well, but these are the major food products where it is there. Let's now move on to real estate. It is a major player in real estate, not among the top 10, but it is major player. And if, as and when the major redevelopment project in Dharavi, Mumbai takes off, and that Dharavi, as you know, is Asia's biggest quote-unquote slum, that would, there is another story behind that, how it obtained that contract, but he would be a major player in real estate. The Adani Group is a major player in providing data storage facilities. The Adani Group is a major provider of equipment to India's defense services, including drones, also called unmanned aerial vehicles, for the defense services. It also puts other equipment. It has a tie-up with an Israeli firm to assemble and sell drones to the defense services. Until recently, not now, but until about 10 years ago, the Adani Group was India's biggest aggregator of cut and polished diamonds and exporter of jewelry with studded, with diamond studded. It has divested that particular business. Mr. Adani, after he dropped out from college, he began his business career as a trader in diamonds and plastic waste, but it has now been divested to others. His older brother's samdhi or in-law, अरे मैं हिंदी में बोला भूल गया, ये तो हीरा का धंधा चलते हैं. अडानी जी का जो बड़ा भाई है ना विनोद जी का समधी है, उनका नाम है जतिन मेहता जी. वो इस वक्त भारत से भाग गए हैं, डिक्लेयर्ड एब्सकॉन्डर. तो उनका जो 2 कंपनी है, विंसम डायमंड्स और फॉरएवर ऐसा कुछ है, वो जो एनपीएस है, नॉन परफॉर्मिंग एसेट्स, भारतीय रिजर्व बैंक सबसे ज्यादा वो बैंकों से कर्ज लिया और वापस नहीं दिया. तो ये जतिन मेहता जी का कहानी है. आजकल वो अभी टेलीकॉम में भी जाने चाहते हैं, मुंद्रा में एक कोयला से प्लास्टिक पीवीसी इलाका में जाने चाहते हैं. मैं भूल गया एक बात, मीडिया, लोक माध्यम, एनडीटीवी खरीदने के बाद हमारे अडानी ग्रुप, हमारे लोक माध्यम में भी उनका काफी एक बड़ा संस्था का ऊपर उनका नियंत्रण है. मैं शायद 2-4 चीज भूल ही गया ना दीपांशु जी, बाद में याद आने के बाद आपको बता देंगे. बट दिस इज अ क्विक समरी, इफ यू लाइक, अ लॉन्ड्री लिस्ट ऑफ all the areas where हमारे गौतम अडानी जी, जो एक समय विश्व के सबसे अमीर व्यक्ति में दूसरी स्तर में था, तीसरी स्तर में था, अभी वो है नहीं वो लिस्ट में, वो फोर्ब्स वगैरह बनाते हैं. तो मैं यही इस वक्त के लिए रोकता हूँ. मेरा व्यक्तिगत मेरा 6 मामला चल रहा है मानहानि का, वो अलग अलग अदालत में है. एक लेख मैंने लिखा था जब मैं इकोनॉमिक एंड पॉलिटिकल वीकली का संपादक था, वो तो एक सब लोग जानते हैं. हाँ, वो केस अभी भी चल रहा है मुंद्रा में. जनवरी 2021 में मेरे खिलाफ एक नॉन बेलेबल वारंट ऑफ अरेस्ट. तो दिस वाज कोई भाई साहब हमें अंग्रेजी में सुनने चाहते हैं, बट ये बिना जमानत का जो वारंट ऑफ अरेस्ट था, तो मेरा वकील साहब कहा कि ये गैर कानूनी है. फिर वो हाई कोर्ट से स्टे मिल गया. मैंने खुद गया मुंद्रा में, वहाँ के जो मजिस्ट्रेट साहब हैं उनसे एक बार नहीं, मैं 3 बार गया. तो ये 2 केस है. वो ईपीडब्ल्यू जो लेख नीचे कर दिया, जो पढ़ने चाहते हैं वायर में चले जाइए, गो टू द वायर. It's called Modi government's 500 crore bonanza to Adani, something along those lines. My lips were sealed on the 20th, September 2020, because of a series of 3 articles that I co-authored with Abir Dasgupta, which was published by Newsclick. उनका जो सुर्खियां है, headlines जो था, उसमें लिखा था कि Justice Arun Kumar Mishra's parting within inverted commas gift of 8,000 crore to Adani. तो हमारे खिलाफ जो वो मुंद्रा में मेरा खिलाफ जो आरोप था, वो थी मैंने कोर्ट में हाजिरा दे. Then I went and said, हाँ आरोपी हाजिर है, the accused person is in court. This one was, we had lowered the esteem of the judiciary in the eyes of the public. यानी कि हम जो अदालत है, भारतवर्ष का न्यायालय का जो इज्जत, जो मर्यादा को हमने कमजोर किया. तो इसके ऊपर हमारा मुंह बंद है. तो इसीलिए मैं आपको जो दे रहा हूँ सूचना. I'm only speaking facts. Welcome. Arrive at your own conclusion. I will stick to facts. Thank you. I can go on, but I'll stop for the time being.
Thank you. I'll come to Professor Arun Kumar, just because I think this is a good broader sort of point of intervention where Professor, we need your sort of interpretation of what's been happening over the last week and a half. I think you're on mute right now. You could just unmute yourself. I have a couple of things where it might be good for the benefit of the audience, where if you could keep the observations largely aligned to those areas, and then we'll come back in the question and answer session on what comments. So one is that, Hindenburg is as I mentioned, an activist short seller. What is the need of having short sellers in the world that we are living in? They help in self-correcting markets, and especially companies that appear too big to fail, as Paranjoy mentioned. So we want to get a sense of what, for example, Hindenburg's own value is, right, in that regard. The other point is the question on debt, which is a question worth asking, because a lot of the borrowing strategy of the Adani conglomerate over the last 2-3 years has been on raising money through issuance of international bonds. And the exposure in the domestic banks has been quite saturated and well utilized already. So how is the current scenario likely to, affect the company's capital raising strategies and, other things? And finally, what do you see on the wider economic front, investment, the social sort of economic impact of this event? Please, Professor.
Just 1 second, Dr. Arun Kumar. Deepanshu, a lot of people are saying if it is in English and there are few asking for Hindi. Is it possible that Dr. Arun Kumar speaks in English and then for the Hindi speakers, you just do the main points in Hindi?
Yeah. We can
That's
do
possible.
that. We can. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so shall I begin?
Yes, please.
Okay. Thanks to Anhat for organizing it and for inviting me to speak. Friends, since time is short and there's a lot to say, what I'll do is I'll just make some point-wise, like bullet point kind of thing. So, some people say that after all, Adanis have a lot of assets. So what is wrong? We need to understand that, what is it that has gone wrong, given that, they have so much assets, and people say that it will not sink because it has so many assets in it. So we need to answer some of these questions. So as Paranjoy has already flagged, cronyism is a part of capitalism. It's not as if it's something new. And as he's already pointed out, internationally also, the Chaibols in South Korea, the Japan Incorporated in Japan, the Enron case in the USA, for all cases of cronyism. And many presidents in Korea have resigned, and prime ministers in Japan have resigned as a result of this. In India too, as Paranjoy pointed out, cronyism has been part of the growth of capitalism. But I think what's different now is the astounding scale at which it has happened. And I think that's what Paranjoy pointed out. He brought that out very well. Now, the kind of mechanism that's been pointed out in the Hindenburg report, which they have deployed to actually become so big, comes out in the FPO, the manner in which the FPO got subscribed at the last minute on the last day. It wasn't getting subscribed, and it got subscribed. The price band was about 3,200 under the FPO. And in the market, it was available for 2,900 rupees. And on February 27th, it was at 2,700. And post the FPO, it was down to 2,100. So everybody knew that this was going to go down. Why would some serious investor invest at 3,200 when in the market it was available for 2,700? Okay, it can't be. So that is what shows the manipulation, the way the working of the Adanis. There are only two possibilities. Why did the high net worth individuals invest? They invested because there's pressure on them. Okay. Second is money came from abroad. Why did money come from abroad? From serious investors to buy at 3,200 rather than available at the market for 2,700, because it was probably money round trip. And I think the Hindenburg report points to the massive round tripping, the thousands of companies that are owned by the Adanis and thousands of transactions that take place, to manipulate the price. So the FPO itself shows what the Hindenburg report is pointing out, which we all need to be aware of. So we need to ask ourselves, okay, they have assets, but the question is, that doesn't show why the valuation is so high. Those assets are valued very high. And that is what underlies the increase in the wealth of the Mr. Adani. Now, Mr. Adani has not come out with some new technology, unlike Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and so on, because of which, they have some kind of a monopoly and they have, managed to get a high valuation. As Paranjoy pointed out, his growth has been based on acquiring assets, already existing assets, and his growth has been based on actually...
Arunji, can I just interrupt you for
sure
2 seconds? I forgot to mention, after the Adani Group acquired Holcim's assets in India, it is the second largest cement manufacturer in
Right.
India. This is exactly to supplement his point. Please continue. Please continue.
Yeah. So businesses, as has been pointed out, were acquired in areas where they had no experience. Okay. And what does that suggest? That suggests that some kind of nexus existed which enabled them to acquire assets. So it's not just that they were bidding high and therefore they got the assets, but I think there was some nexus. And this can only be because the powers that be were interested that this company become very large. These powers also enabled them to get loans, and the Australia case is there before us, where they went to Australia to get the coal mine. The multinational banks were not willing to lend, and within a short span of time, $1 billion was given by State Bank of India. It's not clear that any due diligence was done.
1 minute, Professor Arun Kumar ji, I'll correct you.
Yeah.
That loan never came. That $1 billion loan was supposed to be given by the State Bank of India. It never came.
No, that's okay. But the State Bank of India at that point of time said they were willing to give $1 billion.
That's right. They were willing to give.
Yeah.
That's all. That's all. Just a factual point.
So they were enabled to get contracts or assets, as was pointed out earlier, wherever the Prime Minister visited abroad, soon after that, they either got the assets and so on. Then, investigation by agencies has not taken place, whereas investigation by agencies should have taken place when their share price rose dramatically. Drugs which landed at the Adani, the port, the Mundra port, worth about 30,000 crores. What has come out of that?
Biggest in the world. Biggest in the world.
Right. So, the point is that investigations, are stymied. Price earning ratio, which is usually around 15 to 22, 25, in some cases of Adani are astounding levels of few hundred, not just few tens, but few hundreds, Now that should have alerted SEBI. And, the high gearing ratio that was pointed out by the Fitch report earlier, that's now being pointed out, which was evident all the time, that should have alerted the RBI. Because the high gearing ratio means that you have a debt much larger than your equity, At 2:1, it's reasonably safe. At 4:1, for maybe the infrastructure sector. But if it's much more than that, then it's very risky, because in a downturn, you'll not be able to pay the interest. And therefore, that should be something that should have been noted. And that was not being noted. RBI has its nominees in the banks. The RBI nominees should have been alert to what's happening. LIC was investing when the mutual funds were not willing to invest. The private mutual funds were not willing to invest because it was highly risky. But the LIC went in and invested. That needs to be looked at. Then, as the Hindenburg report points out, there are a large number of shell companies that were being operated. And these, are usually used to round trip money. You take money out and you bring it back through shell companies to the tax havens. So that is how the valuation is raised. And when the valuation of shares is raised, then you can raise more debt. You can, sort of stake it with the banks and raise more funds. But that becomes very risky, as the amount of shares that are staked and the amount of loans that is taken, because then the loans keep rising, the shareholding is much less. So that the risk of failure keeps on increasing as a result of that. Now, the undue high valuations and the higher risk therefore makes it easy for a short seller, because a short seller knows that you have a lot of debt, you have the equity which is very low compared to the debt, and you can short sell. And when you short sell, it means you don't have the shares, but you've sold them with the hope that the price will drop. And when the price drops, you take advantage of that. And now no Indian entity would have short sold. Why? Because the powers that be, people realize that are behind it, would not allow that. So it had to be an international short seller. Only an international short seller on which the Indian government's hold would not be there. They are the ones who could short sell, and that's why Hindenburg is the one that actually did it and short sold. In India also, I mean, they're very smart brokers and smart investors and so on, who could have seen an opportunity to short sell, but I don't think they were scared. Now, foreign capital that has come in, according to the Adanis, the question is, whose money is that? Is that the Adani's money being round trip, or is that actually genuine investors coming in? And my suspicion is, given the risk, it is probably largely the round tripping of money. Now, round tripping of money could be of the politicians, could be of the Adanis, could be of the other friends of Adani's. Then the issue that has been flagged is of the auditors. Very young auditors of the age group of 22, 23, 24, they have been appointed as auditors. Whereas, for auditing such a large firm with such a complex set of operations, you need very experienced auditors. For instance, in the Satyam's case, 6,000 crores of fixed deposits are missed. Now, how could that be possible unless there was in league between the businessmen and the auditors? Now, these are some of the questions that we need to look at. And if you look at the impact on the Indian economy, then the first thing is that the investment climate has not been very good in India. The capacity utilization, according to RBI, has been around 72, and this will damage the investment climate in India. Second is that because there's so much acquisition of assets, the problem that comes is that many businessmen would fear that if they were successful, they could also be taken over. So the business climate, therefore, as a result, deteriorates. And that's the reason why high net worth individuals in India have been leaving in large numbers. In 2019, the report came that out of 2.5 lakh high net worth individuals in India, 23,000 had left between 14 and 18, and 5,000 in 2019, and subsequently more have gone down. The next point is that because the stock market has become unstable and the stock market has declined, not that the stock market, the average Indian invests, it is the people with surplus money, which is the top 2% or 3% of Indians. But as the stock market declines, they begin to lose. So public holding in the Adani stocks is very small, between 1% and 8-9% in different companies. So it's not that the stock directly the public is going to suffer, but indirectly the public suffers as other stocks also decline. So the investing public suffers as a result of that. Now, if the banks begin to have problems, the NPAs go up as a result of this kind of decline in the Adani stocks and in general, then what would happen is that the gap between the lending rate and the borrowing rate of the banks, that would increase. And therefore, the general public would suffer. Similarly, the LIC could suffer. And therefore, those who have insurance with the LIC, they could suffer as a result of that. LIC's dividend could also go down. Therefore, LIC's stock market pricing, that could also go down. And in general, what's happened is that the Indian stock market and the Indian business companies, their name has been sullied. That this is the way that the Indian businesses operate. And that therefore means that foreign capital flow could slow down. Now, this is the time when the current account deficit is very high and you need foreign capital flows to basically support. That could actually go down. And if that happens, then the next step would be that the rupee would weaken because the reserves would go out. And when the rupee weakens, the inflation rate would go up, and that would again impact the common public. Now, why is all this happening? We need to understand that there's a twin strategy of the government of India. What is this twin strategy? I've been writing about it for some time. The twin strategy is to promote some big businessmen like the chai balls, and Adani is the prime example of that, And on the other hand, because when you do that, you give concessions. So like, for instance, the Atmanirbhar Bharat package that was there in May 2020 during the pandemic, that gave 22 lakh crores, but only 3 lakh crores went to the people who'd lost everything, who needed the funds, and the remaining 19 lakh crore was all credit to businesses, etc. So it's very clear that the government of India is promoting big business, okay? And as a result, the poor people are suffering. And that is the part of the political strategy, that if the poor people suffer, then we can keep giving them a little bit of sop, and therefore they'd be indebted. So permanently, you create a constituency for yourself politically by saying we are giving you free grains, we are giving you free, gas and various other things. So you create a permanent political constituency by doing that. But on the other hand, you create the big, big businesses like the chaeballs of South Korea and so on. But this strategy is now unraveling. The decline in the Adanis, the collapse of the Adanis shows that this strategy is unraveling. And also because of the inequality and lack of demand at the lower levels, the rate of growth is not rising. If you see before the pandemic, for 8 quarters, the rate of growth dropped from 8% to 3.1% just before the pandemic. And during the pandemic, if you compare the Q2 of this year with the Q2 of 2019 before the pandemic, the economy is only 8% higher, which means the average rate of growth in the last 3 years is about 2.75%, So in other words, the economy's rate of growth has come down as a result of that, because it's all happening in the organized sector. The unorganized sector is suffering, employment is suffering, inequality is rising, and therefore, the public at large is suffering. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you, Professor Arun. Just to give, especially Hindi में थोड़ा सा आइडिया देने के लिए कि क्या प्रोफेसर अरुण कुमार काफी विषयों पे उन्होंने टच किया, बट मैं कोशिश करूंगा कि कुछ मेन जो एरियाज थे जिसमें इकोनॉमी पे रिफ्लेक्ट किया उन्होंने वो कवर हो पाए. पहले तो जो क्रोनिज्म है वो कैसे कैपिटलिज्म का पार्ट है, इस पे परंजॉय एंड प्रोफेसर अरुण बोथ रिफ्लेक्टेड. इन दोनों ने इस विषय पे बात करी कि कैसे अदानी के बिजनेसेस ग्रो किए, लॉजिस्टिक्स, रिटेल, एनर्जी, एक सेक्टर के बाद जो एक्विजिशन हुए एसेट्स के वो बढ़ते गए. और जैसे हार्ड एसेट्स जिसको कहते हैं अदानी बिजनेसेस के लिए बढ़े, इनकी जो वैल्यूएशन थी वो वैल्यूएशन स्टॉक मार्केट में एक्यूरेटली रिफ्लेक्ट तो हुई नहीं. एंड अगर हम प्राइस अर्निंग रेशियोज देखें, डेट इक्विटी इश्यूज को देखें, तो काफी सिग्नल्स थे जो एक रेगुलेटर को आई में रखने चाहिए थे. ये एक मेजर आई थिंक क्वेश्चन मार्क है जो सेबी, आरबीआई से भी पे सवाल उठाता है कि कैसे ये सब मार्कर्स देखा नहीं गया. दूसरा चीज जो एफपीओ का प्रोसेस था, जो कि बहुत ही लास्ट मिनट कैपिटल मोबिलाइजेशन से किया गया, अगर आप देखें वो भी काफी कुछ अदानी के बिजनेस स्ट्रेटजीज को लेकर एक्सपोज करता है. ज्यादातर जो मनी आया वो कुछ क्षेत्रों से आया जहां से मनी मोबिलाइज किया गया, एंड वो एक राउंड ट्रिपिंग जिसे प्रोफेसर अरुण ने मेंशन किया. नाउ राउंड ट्रिपिंग क्या है, फॉर दोज हु डोंट अंडरस्टैंड, लार्जली राउंड ट्रिपिंग मेथड होते हैं जो आप टैक्सेस को इवेट करने के लिए, मनी को लॉन्डर करने के लिए आप यूज करते हैं. एंड दैट्स वेयर अ लॉट ऑफ द मनी दैट द अदानी बिजनेसेस हैव मेड. जो बात भी हिंडनबर्ग ने अपनी रिपोर्ट में रखी वो इन सिलसिलों में थी. In fact, Paranjoy, if you could also explain how this round tripping, because that's a question which a lot of people have asked, is that how round tripping in the Adani conglomerate's case actually happened. Like, to give one sector or one particular business as an example where you see that laundering of money was more evident in evidence based on your own work, that would be great. But we'll come back to that. 2-3 points जो और economy के सिलसिले में important हैं कि स्टॉक मार्केट करेक्शन या स्टॉक मार्केट में अगर एकदम से 120 बिलियन डॉलर एकदम से गायब हो जाए और लॉस हो जाए एक पर्टिकुलर कंपनी को, तो हाउ डज दिस इम्पैक्ट द ब्रॉडर इकोनॉमी. ये एक सवाल जो जनरल ऑडियंस समझना चाहे, उसके लिए ये चीज है कि जो स्टॉक्स अदानी बिजनेसेस कनेक्टेड हैं, जैसे सीमेंट है, कंस्ट्रक्शन के, रिटेल है, बिजनेसेस हैं, उनका एक्सपोजर इन कॉन्ग्लोमरेट की तरफ ज्यादा है. एंड इसी वजह से दिक्कत उन बिजनेसेस के लिए होती है जिनके खुद के ऑर्डर्स, चाहे परचेज ऑर्डर्स हो, रिक्विजिशन ऑर्डर्स हो, वो एक मेजर कॉन्ग्लोमरेट से जुड़े हों. सो इनकी स्टॉक की वैल्यूएशन मॉनिटर करना बहुत जरूरी है अगले आने वाले कुछ हफ्तों में. जो लेंडिंग बोरोइंग रेट है बैंक का, ना बैंक्स ऑलरेडी, एज सबको पता होगा कि इंडियन कॉन्टेक्स्ट में बैंक्स काफी अफेक्टेड रहे हैं. एनपीएस की वजह से बैड डेट्स बहुत हाई रहे. ये इंपॉर्टेंट मुद्दा है बताने के लिए कि ज्यादातर ये जो एनपीए का एक्यूमुलेशन हुआ है वो इस वजह से हुआ क्योंकि काफी कॉर्पोरेट हाउसेस ने अपने डेट्स और लोन्स रीपे नहीं किए. इसलिए नहीं कि फार्म लोन वेवर्स हुए या अनाउंस हुए, ये जो काफी कुछ एक सॉर्ट ऑफ नैरेटिव बना रहता है कि एनपीएस का मेन सोर्स रूरल इकोनॉमी से रिलेटेड है कहीं है, वो चीज गलत है. A lot has to depend with what is happening in the nature of loans जो बैंक्स ने प्राइवेट सेक्टर में दिए हैं. तो वो एक इशू होगा कि बैंक्स कैसे अपनी बोरिंग लेंडिंग स्ट्रेटजीज को चेंज करते हैं. एलआईसी का एक्सपोजर जो एक आई थिंक बात पहले भी रखी गई है कि एक्सपोजर एक कंसर्न है, बहुत तो नहीं बट एक सिग्निफिकेंट एक्सपोजर एलआईसी हैज इन टर्म्स ऑफ परचेजेस. एंड ये सवाल जरूर खड़ा होना चाहिए इंस्टीट्यूशनली.
Professor Deepanshu,
Yes, sorry.
LIC's exposure is 36,000 crore.
36,000 करोड़. So 36,000 करोड़ के जैसे अमाउंट पे जो कि एक आपने एज ए लार्जेस्ट इंश्योरेंस बेस्ड कॉर्पोरेशन को रखा. मुझे याद है 2007-8 में AIG जब was almost at the verge of collapse, there was no way out, but government को step in करना पड़ा because वो afford नहीं कर सकते थे इतने बड़े इंश्योरेंस का. सो हमें LIC, SBI और जो भी पब्लिक सेक्टर बैंक्स का एक्सपोजर है वो थोड़ा देर से मॉनिटर करना होगा. एक लास्ट पॉइंट जो प्रोफेसर अरुण कुमार ने मेंशन किया, एंड आई थिंक ये हमारे आगे डिस्कशन के लिए भी इम्पोर्टेंट है, कि जो गवर्नमेंट की स्ट्रैटेजी है पिछले 8 या 9 वर्ष में, वो कैसे प्रो बिजनेस ज्यादा रही है और एंटाई सॉर्ट ऑफ अपवर्ड मोबिलिटी ऑफ मिडिल इनकम ग्रुप्स का एक एविडेंस जो कि बहुत ज्यादा क्लियरली एविडेंट है. अगर हम ये देखें पहली चीज की प्रो बिजनेस क्यों, जैसे आत्मनिर्भरता का पैकेज जो अनाउंस किया गया था पैंडेमिक में, उसमें 22 लाख करोड़ अनाउंस किए गए, जिसमें 3 लाख करोड़ ही खाली पीपल बेस्ड स्पेंडिंग फिस्कल लिए रिलेटेड था. बाकी मोस्ट ऑफ देम वर इन फॉर्म ऑफ लिक्विडिटी मेजर्स जो कि आरबीआई एंड अदर इंस्टीट्यूशंस के थ्रू फैसिलिटेटेड रहा. अभी इस समय भी 80 करोड़ लोगों के लिए राशन की स्कीम चल रही है जो कि गवर्नमेंट ने फिर एक्सटेंड कर ली है. तो एक तरीके से एक स्ट्रैटेजी रखी है कि गरीब को उसी एक लेवल पे रखा जाए ताकि उनको सोप्स के थ्रू पॉलिटिकल एजेंडा को आगे रख पाएं. और दूसरा जो बिजनेसेस हैं उनको जितने इंसेंटिव दे सकें आप दें, ताकि उससे आप स्पेशली सर्टेन बिजनेस हाउसेस को उनकी ग्रोथ को कॉम्प्रोमाइज ना करें. बट ओवरऑल इंडियन इकोनॉमिक सिचुएशन, चाहे आप इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ को देखें, प्राइवेट इन्वेस्टमेंट को देखें, कंजम्पशन डिमांड को देखें, इन सब एरियाज में अगर आप देखेंगे गवर्नमेंट का कोई बहुत स्ट्रॉन्ग इंटरवेंशन नहीं रहा है, जिस वजह से ये इंडिकेटर्स चेंज्ड हो. एंड ये कोविड के समय की या कोविड के बाद की कहानी नहीं है. अगर आप 2016 से ही देखें, जो नेचर ऑफ रिफॉर्म्स भी इन गवर्नमेंट ने स्टार्ट किए, फैक्टर मार्केट रिफॉर्म्स जिनको हम बोलते हैं, लैंड, लेबर, कैपिटल, entrepreneur centered, none of those have yielded the desired intended outcomes, which is one of the key factors. So with that, I think maybe it might be just a good time to also bring some questions in from the audience. But before that, Paranjoy, you wanted to just thoda sa ye jo round tripping ka mechanism is pe agar aap bataएं.
I'll speak in both English and Hindi. I'll mix. I'll repeat myself in English and then I'll speak in English and then repeat myself in Hindi to save you the trouble of translating it. अभी एक भाई साहब ने जयचंद्रन साहब ने कहा ये 2 प्रोफेसर थियोराइजिंग कर रहे हैं. तो मैंने कहा तो मैं तो प्रोफेसर नहीं हूं, मैं थोड़ा बहुत पढ़ाता हूँ, थियोराइजिंग कर रहा है, कोई बात नहीं. I'll give you some specific examples. और प्लीज कीप इन माइंड कि मेरा आरोप नहीं. I am not making any allegation. I will relate to you the allegations that have been leveled by DRI, yani ki Directorate of Revenue Intelligence. It's the intelligence wing of the customs authorities in the Department of Revenue in the Ministry of Finance. Yani ki वित्त मंत्रालय का जो सोच है, जो उनका खोजी जो संस्था है, ये है DRI. DRI पिछले कुछ सालों में number of show cause notices have been issued against the Adani Group. यानी कि कारण दिखाओ नोटिस. ये मामला चल रहा है, सुप्रीम कोर्ट में चल रहा है, अलग अलग अदालत में चल रहा है. If you want to read these show cause notices, please read it. 5 years ago, I put them up on my website, paranjoy.in. उसके ऊपर आप चले जाइए, the A files. These are long documents. सैकड़ों पन्ने का है, hundreds of pages. उसमें आप अगर बारीकी से पढ़ेंगे, which the Hindenburg report also points out, आपको बता दें कि ये राउंड ट्रिपिंग क्या होता है, और इस विषय के ऊपर प्रोफेसर अरुण कुमार और ज्यादा कह सकते हैं कि जब पैसा, और ये जो गर्म पैसा है, हॉट मनी, यानी कि गैर कानूनी मनी, इलीगल मनी, एक जगह से दूसरी जगह से तीसरी जगह से चौथा जगह से द आइडिया इज टू नॉट allow the tax authorities to find out the root of the fund. The whole idea is to make black money into white and to ensure that the tax authorities do not tax you. यानी कि आप कर छूट दे रहे हैं, आयकर विभाग है और भी सीमा शुल्क भी है, ये आप नहीं देने चाह रहे, तो यही कानून है। ये ओवर इनवॉइसिंग का बात क्या है? आप समझ लीजिए, you have bought something which costs 100 rupees, but you are showing you are paid 120. So 120 की जगह 100 की जगह आप 120 दिखा रहे हैं, ये बाकी 20 रुपए कहाँ जाता है? तो ये घूम फिर के इधर से उधर से भारत विश्व में ऐसे 80 टैक्स हेवन्स है, जैसे मॉरिशस, जैसे साइप्रस, ब्रिटिश वर्जिन आइलैंड, सिंगापुर, अलग अलग जगह है, यहाँ घूम फिर के वापस आ जाते हैं। तो the allegation that has been made, not by me, by the DRI, आप खुद पढ़ के देखिए कि this money is actually round trip money, और यही पैसा कुछ उनका अपना शेयर का कीमत बढ़ा दिया. So this money is being misused, and this is really the main allegation against this. I'll make a few observations about FPOs. जैसे हमने कहा पहले, 15-20 साल में जिस रफ्तार से, जिस गति से अडानी ग्रुप, the way it went up, I mean, who could have imagined that here was a person who nobody knew 20 years ago, and then he becomes the world's second richest man and the third richest man. There's something that has to be said. So whereas his growth was spectacular, it took several years. 10, 12, 15 साल लगा. मगर जिस रफ्तार से वो गिर गया, that was even more spectacular. 32,000 words, please read it. Please read it. उसमें आज भी मैं कहना चाहता हूँ, people are saying allegation, counter allegation. Let SEBI decide. Let Reserve Bank of India decide. Not I. Lok Sabha Member of Parliament Mahua Mitra has gone on record saying, I wrote to SEBI 1.5 years ago. There were reports in CNBC. You can't find that anymore on YouTube. There were the Economic Times has been sued for defamation. Ravi Nair, a year and a half ago, for a website called Adani Watch, wrote a series of articles. उसमें पूरा सबका नाम है, जिस कंपनी से यूके का जो भूतपूर्व प्रधानमंत्री बोरिस जॉनसन का भाई भी था. My website, somebody is asking, is paranjoy.in. The microsite within is the A files. The A files, as in the Adani files. So I'll make just 1 or 2 more points in connection with what was raised. Why were the FPOs suddenly called up? ये सब लोग आश्चर्य हो गए. आप हिंडनबर्ग रिपोर्ट 24 जनवरी आया, उसके बाद शेयर बाजार में इनके सारे शेयर्स गिर गए, अडानी समूह का भी शेयर गिर गया. But the day before the budget, यानी कि the last day of January, उस दिन अडानी जी कहा कि हाँ, हमारे ये 20,000 करोड़ हमें मिल रहे हैं. We are fully subscribed. एक दिन में 1%, second day 2%. Suddenly on the last day, you said you got the full money. And then we got to know that it was family trusts and family offices of Sunil Bharti Mittal, of Airtel, Bharti Airtel. Then we got to know that it was Jindal Steel Works, Sajan Jindal. We got to know that the promoters of Torrent Power, the Zydus Cadillac. Now the question, and this is a very important point which a lot of people haven't noticed. अब कैसा मालूम है कि ये सारे बड़े-बड़े पूंजीपति का पैसा आया है ये FPOs पे? It's interesting because you get to know only after the follow-on public offering is over. Then only you know who has invested what. So it's interesting how this information leaked out. फिर आप जानते हैं 1 February निर्मला सीतारामन जी हमारे केंद्रीय बजट उन्होंने पेश किया, और हम जानते हैं जिस समय बजट पेश कर रहे थे और बजट के बाद बहुत सारी कंपनियों का शेयर का कीमत बढ़ा, एक्सेप्ट द अडानी ग्रुप. और इससे ज्यादा लोग आश्चर्य हो गए कि रात 10:30 के बाद 10-40 के आसपास घोषणा किया कि हम ये पूरा वापस ले रहे, ये 20,000 crore, everybody who has given this 20,000 crores, we'll return the money. And the following morning, when people were just about waking up, Shri Adani made a public statement on television saying, morally, according to him, this was the moral thing. No, मैंने नहीं कहा, Adani ji ने कहा. So just as his rise was spectacular, the fall was even more spectacular. Equally unexpected was his decision to withdraw the follow-on public offering after it was fully subscribed.
Yeah. So
मेरा मुंह बंद है ना, अदालत मेरा मुंह बंद के रखा, तो बहुत कुछ भी कहना नहीं चाहता हूँ, मगर जो मैंने कहा, मैंने नहीं कहा
जी,
सार्वजनिक है, it's in the public domain, you arrive at your own conclusion.
जी. No, thank you, Paranjoy. I just very quickly, before I just let those who have raised their hands to ask their respective questions, Professor Arun Kumar, ये जो money laundering का process है, and generally what in portfolio investment, the vast influx and going of hot money which we discuss, and उसका जो impact exchange rates पे पड़ता है, जो well documented है macroeconomic learnings में, how do you see the whole Adani Hindenburg saga affecting India's macroeconomic fundamentals? ये question actually काफी लोगों ने पूछा है in retrospect in passing. So ये चीज पे अगर आप reflect कर पाए, and then होशियार जी, B.S. Naidu, David, we'll just let all of you ask your questions.
So, what happens is that when you generate black incomes, you do that, as Paranjoy is saying, through under-invoicing, over-invoicing, and then you take the black incomes out. And in my estimate, only 10% of the black incomes go out, 90% remain here. Now, this 10% that goes out through a process called layering. What is layering? As Paranjoy said, there are 90 tax havens in the world. And what you do is you transfer money to a shell company in one tax haven, then from there you transfer to a second tax haven and close the earlier shell company, and then to a third and a fourth and a fifth. And then the sixth one is where you finally park the money. So therefore you are eliminating the mechanism for tracing how the money has moved. So for instance, if you ask Swiss government, they say that actually the largest amount is British money, because Britain controls the largest amount of tax havens. So Jersey Island, Cayman Island, etc. So if Jersey Island money goes to Switzerland, it's called British money. So that's why Britain and the British have the largest amount of money in the tax havens in Switzerland. Okay, so this money is very hard to track. It's only through stolen data, like Paradise Papers, like Panama Papers, British Virgin Island Papers, LGT Bank, HSBC Bank, it's only then that the names come out. And then too, the names come out only of those who directly put their money, say, in BVI or in Paradise Paper, in Paradise or in so on. But if it has been transferred from somewhere else, then even those names don't come out. Okay. So therefore, the money goes there. And then when you need your money back, then you again bring it back through Mauritius route or through Singapore route or through Dubai route. Okay. Because there you have treaties so that there's no taxation on those. So Mauritius has been one favorite one. That door was closed somewhat. Then it became Singapore, Dubai, etc. Okay. So this money that goes abroad, it comes back. So in my estimate, about 30 to 40% of that 10% that goes abroad comes back through round tripping. The rest of it stays there. But the rest of it that stays there is not necessarily liquid. It's invested in real estate, in yachts, in children's education, in health. It may be in businesses and so on. So what is in liquid form is not very large. But it is not known by the government how much is abroad. There was only one estimate by GFI that $450 billion had gone out. But in my own estimate, we tried to estimate between 1948 and 2012, it was about $2 trillion. And that's the opportunity cost of the money that has gone abroad and the interest that it would have earned. Okay. So that's the opportunity cost, but that doesn't mean that that $2 trillion is available to be brought back. But most businessmen, successful businessmen, have used the route of round tripping to actually bring their money back and support their stock. Okay. They buy their own stock. Therefore, their own holding remains in their hand. It is after 1991, because before 1991, large number of companies were holding 2%, 3%, 5% of their own company stock, and therefore there was a threat of takeover. And ACC was raided at that point of time, and the Tatas therefore decided that they have to raise their stock holding in their own companies to at least 26%. Similarly, others also realized that there was a threat of takeover by hostile people, and therefore everybody moved up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this mechanism had been used to raise the stock market prices and to gain larger control in their own companies.
And one of the things, and just basically, जो पहले भी चीज बोली गई थी कि ये कोई cronyism, state business alliance at a larger level खाली इंडिया तक restricted नहीं है. This is something which is as a model of capitalism. We would have seen that post 90s, Russia, Latin America, many countries have experienced similar modes in which where you have authoritarian transitions in power, centralization of power, but a larger big conglomerate ko aap promote kare as a business entity through different sort of fiscal interventions and liquidity based interventions. तो ये चीज कोई ऐसी नहीं है कि आप ऐसा समझेंगे कि अगर जो लोग इशू को समझना चाह रहे हैं कि बहुत नैरो एपिसोड हो. देयर मेनी थिंग्स, इसका एक हिस्टोरिकल कॉन्टेक्स्ट भी है और एक इंटरनेशनल पर्सपेक्टिव में हाउ मनी फ्लोज एंड लॉन्डर्स इज एक्चुअली काफी समय से इस पे काम चल रहा है. तो राउंड ट्रिपिंग के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में ऐसे परंजॉय जी ने बताया कि आप प्लीज इनकी वेबसाइट में जाके एक जो उस पे डिटेल्स दिए हुए हैं वो आप देखें. मैं इस समय at this point of time I'll get B.S. Naidu ji, can you unmute and please ask a question?
Can I
request
Deepanshu ji, can I make a very small intervention?
जी.
I'll answer two questions that have been raised in the chat.
Oh, okay.
एक सवाल बहुत लोग किया वो है कि ये FPO क्या चीज है, ये कौन सा जानवर है FPO. आपने IPO का नाम, एक कॉर्पोरेट एंटिटी, एक कंपनी जब उनका शेयर पहला बार वो शेयर बाजार में बेचने के लिए देते हैं, that is the first time a corporate entity is selling its shares in the stock exchanges. It is called initial public offering, यानी कि IPO. When you again offer your shares to the public, that is a follow-on public offering, यानी कि FPO. And may I make I answer one Ms. Meera's question about how the DRI had the temerity, her question, not mine, had the temerity to have these show cause notices. Very good question you've asked. Excellent question. मेरा ये सवाल का जवाब बहुत आसान है. देखिए हमारे देश में, हमारे वित्त मंत्रालय में, सरकार में, in our government, in the departments which are notorious for corruption, there are still honest people. Why do you think they came to me with all those documents which I put up in the public domain? Because there are still honest people who have, you can call them whistleblowers, आप कुछ भी कहिए, उनका विवेक है, दिमाग है. And the question that was asked by another person as to why the FPOs was withdrawn, I can speculate, but I don't want to do that because my lips are sealed. You come and meet me individually, I can talk to you in private.
Okay, thank you. B.S. Naidu ji, unmute करके आप सवाल अपना पूछ सकते हैं. You can ask your question. David, you can go next, and Siva Kumar ji, you can go after that. Just make sure कि आप अपना सवाल सामने रखें. You put your question across and address it to the particular speaker. Thank you. Okay.
Sir,
please.
Sir, why the tax laws are silent? Why the tax laws are not
on tax
closed up by the government?
All right, tax laws. Okay, that's one. David, do you want to go ahead with your question, please?
Yes, please. First, want to wish Mr. Paranjoy Guha Thakurta. Probably he doesn't remember. I was the Federation of Indian Mineral Industries. He had come to Bangalore and met me. That was the time when the Bellary iron ore scam was on. So very nice to see you, sir. And
I remember you very well, Mr. Pichamutu. I remember you very well.
Thank you. So we hope to be interacting with you. I have got your now email ID. I will be asking you certain things because some of the things can't be mentioned here. The other question I want to ask Dr. Arun Kumar, you see, how much has the fact that there is a Competition Commission of India. They used to have a 5-year tenure, and I think their emoluments used to be fixed like the Supreme Court judges. I think this government has, first of all, lowered the period from 5 years to 4 years, and then also made them obliged to the government for the salary. Has this also been helpful for the Adani Group to acquire so many assets? Thank you, sir.
Siva Kumar, please. Yeah, you can unmute and put your question, please. Yeah.
Basically, just wanted to ask, see, most of these infrastructure projects, the tariff is fixed based on the capital that is being supposedly being brought in by the promoters. And in the case, as Paranjoy was talking about, there has been so much of over invoicing of the DRI as issued invoices. Even I think even now there's some talk of a CSTAT order being challenged by the DRI in High Court or Supreme Court. So has this also over invoicing, padding up the project cost, particularly of power plants, port, etc., has also helped them to get more profit than what they actually are supposed to get? If for this project, the infrastructure project, they're supposed to have. This is my question.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Sateshwaran, please. Is it okay if we can take a couple of questions and then give time? Paranjoy ji, aapko
Yes.
and Professor Arun.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll just get more voices. And
Sure.
Sim, had asked a couple of questions, so we'll let him speak. Sateshwaran, please.
Adani has done a lot of strategic buys on behalf of the government. For an example, the Suez Canal port was all got with an enormous amount beyond imagination, which the government processes will do. So what will happen to those things? What will be the impact of this whole thing in the 2024 elections? And what will be the future recourse? Or he'll also run out of the sale and continue like the Ambanis of the past?
Okay.
Today, now we can't even say about the 1980 Ambanis or the Birlas. They are more grown and they have gone multiple fold. So it will happen like that in the future years. So what will be the future course? What will be the immediate reaction? What will be the long-term reaction of Adani's fate?
Okay, Ram Sharan. I just want to get Ram Sharan and Singh ji here, and then we'll respond to these questions. Ram Sharan, please go ahead.
आवाज आ रही है?
जी जी आ रही है, प्लीज बोलिए।
मैं ये जानना चाहता हूं कि ये जो काला धन को लाने की छूट मिली हुई है ये नकली कंपनियों के माध्यम से, क्या ये सिर्फ मित्रता के नाते है या इलेक्टोरल बॉन्ड के माध्यम से चुनाव खर्च और विधायकों को खरीदने के लिए जो पैसा लगता है वो अडानी जी बड़े पैमाने पर दे रहे हैं, इसलिए ये साठगांठ है?
You opened a Pandora's box. If I were to put it that way. Same, please go ahead. Sorry, I don't know your first name. You'll have to go.
Yeah. Actually, I have put in the chat box 3 questions. First is, Adani is under focus since 2014, his growth chart. But if you look at it, it is actually it was from 2014 to 19, there was a bit of fluctuation and it was rather modest. It took off in 2019. Then 2020, it became, over the 2 years, it became a meteoric rise. Whereas the Modi is there as the Prime Minister for 8 years by then, why 2020-21 and 2021-22, the rise was so abruptly sharp? That is the question number 1. The question number 2, which Paranjoy ji has refused to answer, rather declined to answer, is after orchestrating the oversubscription of the FPO, why all of a sudden, and evidently that has been done by arm twisting and exercising the political leverage that he enjoys.
Yeah.
Why all of a sudden you said that you scrap it? And then actually that impact was traumatic. The third point is this: assuming the government sticks to its stand as it is now, what is going to happen because of the market force? That are the three questions.
Okay, and lastly, मैं बस एक one question, कुमार जी please, आप unmute कर सकते हैं. 1 minute जरा सा मैं जो questions mention किए गए chat box में, Professor Arun Kumar, on LIC, I think this is a area which, what your understanding is that the exposure of LICs to Adani's group, and given the difficulty that Adani Group is now going to face in terms of capital raise nationally and domestically, with the oversight that's there, Modi has just downgraded 4 of its firms. The news I saw before logging in here. So this is going to make things difficult. How do you see the LIC exposure and the impact of that on the common man? Kumar ji, please. आखिरी प्रश्न, उसके बाद एक round of responses.
I have a small question. Since in capitalism, all capitalists are not always united, how are the other big corporate groups looking at Adani's rise and Adani's embarrassment? They should not be happy about this, or they are welcoming it, or they are participating with it. And second question along with that is why the stock market has not crashed radically despite such a huge crores and crores and crores of rupees being seen to be destabilizing everything else, but not politics, not economics, and not stock market. Why?
All right. Professor Arun Kumar, I'll let you go in first. I know a lot of questions, so
not only a lot, but very diverse.
Very diverse, yeah. Whatever, to the extent that you can cover.
So, the first question was regarding the Competition Commission of India and its, decline in the tenure and the salaries being determined, etc. And has that enabled Adanis to acquire assets? Competition Commission will come into play only usually when, the government, comes into play. And the government is not going to come into play. My own suspicion is that the agencies, the regulatory agencies, look at the political signal, and there is something about regulation that I think we need to understand, that in capitalism, when we have regulators, there is also something called gold plating. We saw that in the case of Enron, we saw that in the case of fertilizers, etc., where, the gold plating is done to actually have higher profits. So what you do is you expand your capital base. You say, I've invested X amount. So Enron was, setting up jetties and, covering the factory, bubble and so on and so forth to show much higher capital cost. So therefore, in a sense, when we say regulators, regulation itself is manipulated. It's not that, regulations cannot be manipulated and regulation cannot be manipulated, or that it's somehow fair. And also this is what is called the average cost pricing, and there the costs are revealed by the firms themselves. So the firms will reveal a higher cost, and the regulator doesn't know what the actual cost will be. So therefore you can generate a much higher profit by doing this, and especially the regulator is not going to be very tough with you. So these are some of the things that I think we need to understand, where the political power is very important. Where the regulatory agencies are under the thumb of the regulator, then many of these things will happen. So you can generate higher profits and so on and so forth. And I think that also takes into account the second question about tariff fixation, that was asked, and over-invoicing and under-invoicing to get a higher profit. So that is, over-invoicing and under-invoicing gives you black profits. Those are not the declared profits. The declared profits are what are called the balance sheet profit, and the under-invoicing, over-invoicing gives you what's called the off-balance sheet profit. And off-balance sheet profit can be very high because the off-balance sheet profits, there are no costs. So therefore, everything that you do off-balance sheet is a profit. And therefore, the black profits can be as high as the white profits, So even if you have a margin of 10% in a business and you do 10% of the output evasion, the incomes would double. So black incomes are much higher than the output evasion. That's a question that people often ask me. So in other words, Adani's and others, they don't need to do 100% output evasion. That is, you're declaring only half the output. Even if you just do 10% evasion, you can double your profits if your margins are 10%. Okay, so that's something that we need to keep in mind. Then there was a question about bringing black money and whether electoral bonds were used, etc. Electoral bonds are one additional mechanism of financing parties. It's not as if your black incomes are not being used to fund. This is in addition to what black incomes are being given. So we know that, for instance, companies' accounts, which are audited, but the auditors actually are at play. Auditors will sign on under invoicing, over invoicing, etc., etc. They're not going to go investigate all that. And therefore, what happens is that just like companies can generate black incomes, similarly, parties can hide their accounts, even though the parties' accounts are audited, but what you receive in cash, that is over and above. So electoral bonds are giving you funds in addition to what black funds are being used. So electoral bonds are no solution to the use of black money in elections or in politics. So therefore, that is a short answer to this question. And now the question about why FPO was withdrawn, and I think why the FPO was withdrawn was because of the pressure that was building up on the Adanis, that their share prices had dropped, so they had to actually repay the banks and so on. Okay, so the money that was being brought in and into the FPO, they perhaps needed that money to actually lower their debt, because the banks were going to ask them to actually lower the debt, given that the stock prices had dropped and the stocks were the ones that were at stake, to get the loans. So I think there was a financial pressure also on why the FPOs were withdrawn. And before the FPO was withdrawn, just around that time, $1.1 billion was returned also, if you notice, by the Adanis, to the banks, because again, the pressure was building up. And this is the problem of having a very high debt to equity ratio, that when you have a very high debt to equity ratio, then even if small amounts have to be returned, then a lot of undoing of the earlier problems that has to be done. Then how are the other big corporates looking at the whole thing? I think in India, all corporate sectors reading the signals from the top. And if they feel that the top is in favor of somebody, they're not going to go against them. So I think even though they may be happy internally, but I don't think they would dare to come. And I think Rahul Bajaj had said that earlier, that businessmen are scared. Just like in media, there's a capture, amongst the corporates also there's a capture. And the stock market, why did it not collapse further? We all know that financial institutions are told to support the stock market whenever the stock market comes down. During the budget time, the stock market is boosted by the financial institutions. So financial institutions' money is used to prevent the stock market from going down further. It's not as if the public is going to suddenly start withdrawing from, say, Tatas and Birlas and others. So therefore, I think the stock market did not go down further. And LIC exposure, LIC exposure is a small percentage, and what is being said is that after all, LIC invested 36,000 crores, but they made a profit on it for 45,000 crores or something like that. And now the price of the Adani has come down. Still, there's a profit of about 20,000 crores that is still there, given the earlier thing. But I think more than that, the problem is that when LIC is losing out, if the general stock market begins to decline, so if this triggers a slow decline of the stock market, then the LIC's holdings will also lose value, and that is what I think the larger problem is. So I think we have to look at what impact the Adanis will have on the stock market in the long run, not just immediately, but in the coming months, as foreign capital begins to withdraw more, and Total has already suspended its agreement with the Adanis to go in for the agreement that was there. MSCI has downgraded Adani stocks, which is going to have a general impact more on the Adani stocks, and also have a general impact on the Indian stocks in general. So I think, that is the way that LIC would get affected, that other stocks would also decline.
Yeah. All right. Just before Paranjoy, you respond, Vijay, you had and Rajkumar, just a final couple of questions, and I'll give the floor to Paranjoy to make his remarks, and then thereafter we'll just bring the discussion to a close. Yes, Vijay, please, your question. And
thank you. I have two questions. There's a feeling that Adani has grown exponentially. In comparison to Adani, have other large conglomerates grown at the same rate? And what's the difference between the growth between the other large conglomerates and this? And the second question was, has any study been done correlating growth rate of the country with the growth of the conglomerates and Adani? Thank you.
Okay, Rajkumar. Rajkumar, Bharat, you have your hand is up. Okay, Ashwin, finally, go ahead. You'll have to unmute, please, Ashwin.
I have two questions.
Yes, Ashwin, go ahead.
The first question is regarding the rather unusual the galloping of the Indian stock markets in the post-COVID scenario, when economic fundamentals were not very good and still record levels were reached and continued to be exceeded. Could it be explained in terms of what Paranjoy sir talked about, the round-tripping phenomena? Part of the money has been put back into the Indian stock market to keep it at a artificially raised level. Could it be explained through this? So part of the foreign portfolio investors are the round trippers themselves, A. And B is, in all this talk about one A, we have lost sight of the other A. And this also relates to Kumar Ketkar's question, wherein there were reports of the other A being in conflict with the, the Ambani being in conflict, Ambani group being having some conflict issues with the Adani group, and very recently they came to some agreement. So could this, business rivalry between the two top conglomerates also have certain repercussions in days to come? Thank you.
Rajkumar, please.
मेरा पैनलिस्ट से ये प्रश्न है कि इस जो इन्होंने बात रखी है अभी सारी, इसके अंदर किसान क्या कर सकता है भारत का, जो 62 करोड़ है और मजदूर जो 38 करोड़ है, उसके लिए ये सुझाव दें पैनलिस्ट से, सर मेरी प्रार्थना है।
बिल्कुल राजकुमार जी, शुक्रिया आपके सवाल के लिए। Paranjoy, I would let you sort of respond. I know you have a lot, but just the idea here is to give a sense of some of the observations that Professor Arun has already made, but with more details on specific to what Adani's business model has been and its relation to India's sort of growth trajectory. And for Ashwin, the first question you asked, I mean, there's an article long back in 2021 which had written around the stock market and the Wild West sort of mentality which was shaping, and just sharing a link so that you might take a look at it. It was written for a layman audience, but I'll let Paranjoy now sort of respond. Please take a look. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, at the risk of repeating myself, I cannot say many things because my lips are sealed. And I'm very happy that Professor Arun Kumar has responded to some of the questions which I could not have. Let me add some facts before before that. I want to compliment all the people who asked questions: Naidu ji, Pichamududi, Siva Kumar, Sadashwaran, Ram Sharan ji, and most recently the last few sets of questions: Vijay ji, Rajkumar ji, Ashwini ji, etc. A versus A. Yeah, A and A. They are all, if you look at it carefully, जो हमारे अरुण कुमार जी इस विषय के ऊपर और विस्तार से कह सकते हैं, what happens when the regulatory bodies, जो नियंत्रण करने का जिसका दायित्व है, जो जिसका जिम्मेदारी है, Reserve Bank of India, Securities and Exchange Board of India, Competition Commission of India, इन सारे संस्थाओं को जब कैप्चर कर दे, आप इसको अपने कब्जे में ला, then you have the kind of crony capitalism, भाई भाई का पूंजीवाद, दोस्तों का पूंजीवाद, और oligarchy that you are seeing in India. Look at the rise of Reliance Jio. Look at the manner in which Adani Group acquired Mumbai Airport. I have written about this. You can just have to look at it. I mean, the evidence is there. You can come to your own conclusion. बहुत सारे सवाल का जवाब हमारे पास नहीं है. हमारे कमोडोर लोकेश बत्रा साहब है, वो बताएंगे इलेक्ट्रल बॉन्ड. कौन इलेक्ट्रल बॉन्ड दिया? He has raised his hand. Where has the money come from? If we knew, many things would have been changed. We don't know where the money has come from. कहाँ से पैसा आया? कौन दिया? कितना दिया? कब दिया? So देखिए, lots of things I cannot answer. 2024 का चुनाव के ऊपर क्या असर पड़ेगा? अडानी जी का घराना ऊपर जाएगा, नीचे जाएगा. भविष्यवाणी करना तो बहुत आसान काम है. मगर मैं तो एक सार्वजनिक मंच से कुछ नहीं कहना चाहता हूँ. I mean, if you people want to get in touch with me individually, you're most welcome. I live in Gurgaon, Haryana. I've been traveling all over the country. I'll be happy to come. Magar, I cannot say anything except as an ordinary citizen to say कि जिसका काम है, let SEBI, let RBI, let them do their job. This is what, as a citizen, I can urge them. कौन गैर कानूनी काम किया, कौन कैसा किया, हमें मालूम नहीं है. But one or two points that people have made, which I just want to re-emphasize. For the first time, the Life Insurance Corporation, your money, my money, our money, actually issued a press note to say, people are very concerned, but this 36,000 crore is only a very, very small part of our total investments. LIC has never done this before. Why did LIC do it? That's the question. The cases are all over. Some cases have been solved. The Adani Group itself has claimed that we have got a clean check from the highest courts of land. I'm not sure where they got that information from. ये जो over invoicing का case, ये SESTAT में चला गया था. SESTAT is Customs, Excise and Sales Tax Appellate Tribunal. Now the Supreme Court is hearing it. It was in cold storage for some time. The DRI's appeal, they're hearing it. So you can pick and choose the facts and arrive at your own conclusion. माननीय सांसद कुमार केतकर जी, आपसे मैं एक सवाल उठाता हूँ. अडानी जी उत्तर प्रदेश क्यों नहीं गया, लखनऊ में? Why was he not present yesterday at the investor summit, जहाँ पे योगी आदित्यनाथ जी, हमारे माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी और बड़े-बड़े हमारे देश के बड़े-बड़े उद्योगपति सब लोग थे, एक व्यक्ति वहां क्यों नहीं थे? Somebody asked a question about the impact on farmers. देखिए, ये जो हमारे देश के जो कृषक है, जो किसान है, जो आंदोलन किया, ये सिर्फ वो 3 कानून के खिलाफ नहीं. Their poster said Ambani Adani. Ambani is in the retail space and Adani is in the space of bulk storage of food grain. Vijay ji, aapne kaha, are there any such conglomerates that have grown as fast as Adani has? Not to the best of my knowledge. Maybe there are others, maybe Arun Kumar ji and others will be able to tell you. What was the growth rate? How do you compare it with the economy? We know the stock exchange is just a few people. I mean, as a proportion of the Indian population, it's a very, very small proportion of our population who've invested their money in the stock exchange because they have that money to invest. वो हमारे देश का stock exchange जुआरी का अड्डा है या और कुछ है, अलग बात है. These are different questions and merits a different discussion. But I just want to give all of you, I want to thank you all on my own behalf for being with me, and I want to make a personal appeal. देखिए, ये पिछले 6 साल हम कुछ लोग, ज्यादा लोग नहीं, हम 6-8 लोग हैं, हमने लगातार लेख लिखा, मेरे को नौकरी छोड़ना पड़ा. I had to resign from the post of editor in Economic Political Weekly. आप खुद, you know the circumstances. I don't want to repeat all that. Do I feel vindicated? Yes, I feel vindicated. Would I have done anything differently? No, I would not have done differently. People are asking, who are these 5% team in New York, Hindenburg? I had not heard of the name of Hindenburg before. I knew Hindenburg was the president of Germany when Hitler was in power. and that they had built a Zeppelin, a spaceship, and people, it went up in flames and people died. And then I got to know that later on, much later, that this Nathan Anderson had said this epitomizes man-made disasters. There are 7 companies there, what they call outed, short-sold. 2 of those have gone under. These are bigger firms, but this has been their quote-unquote biggest target. Adani ji is going to sue them in New York. Time alone will tell. I cannot predict the outcome of what the court will say. I cannot predict the outcome of the elections to come. I can only guess why France's Total decided to put its billions of dollars of investment in hydrogen on hold. Okay, you now can't laugh at the social media and say ki the best company in the Adani group is Adani Total Gas. If this particular company is now, if it's on hold. But I want to say one more thing before I conclude. It's not just India and the citizens of India. What about the Bangladesh project? What about the Sri Lankan project? What about the project in Australia? So what about Israel? What about Indonesia? What about Nepal? Mr. Adani's corporate footprint is not just across India. It's in many parts of the world. So everybody is watching and very careful.
I'll just get Commodore Lokesh Patra उनका last कब से काफी देर से वो hand please Commodore Lokesh Patra, you want to ask any question?
नहीं, एक question था electoral bond के बारे में.
जी.
I have put the entire data on the chat box and can see the analysis. How many sold, of which value is sold. So roughly now, I'm saying rounding off 11,700 crore worth electoral bonds have been sold, of which 94%, I'm repeating 94% are sold in the value of 1 crore each denomination. Now, who would be buying this? Just imagine who would be buying one. So much of money. It can't be a small corporate. Now, guess is anybody's guess who would be buying. I'm not making anything because I don't know. So that's the point I was making because some questions had come. The entire data is in the chat box. The other thing, मुझे एक question Arun Kumar जी से पूछना है कि the growth of not only we are talking Adani, large number of things, there's huge growth in the COVID years. How do you explain that? Today, Bloomberg had come out with some list of that who have grown hugely during the COVID period when the business people were going down.
Yeah, Onkar, this is the last question. Sorry, in the interest of time, I'll have to sort of intervene. Please go ahead.
मेरा क्वेश्चन है 1991 में हर्षद मेहता स्टॉक मार्केट का घोटाला हुआ था, उसमें जेपीसी बैठी थी. 2001 में केतन पारेख का हुआ, उसमें भी जेपीसी बैठे थे. शेयर मार्केट का ही केस था. आज कल सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने जो अपनी एक गाइडलाइंस दी है, जो पूछा है कि हाउ कैन इन्वेस्टर्स बी शील्डेड फ्रॉम अदानी टाइप वोलेटिलिटी, जो उन्होंने कहा है, तो क्या एक तो इसमें क्या इम्पैक्ट होगा शेयर मार्केट पे, और क्या इसमें जो सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने गाइडलाइंस दी है और उसमें उन्होंने एक कमेटी भी एक्स जज के फॉर्मर जज की उसमें लीडरशिप में गठित करने की बात की है, तो क्या ये हमको बताएंगे कि ये इससे क्या स्टॉक मार्केट पे असर नहीं पड़ेगा और क्या इस पर जेपीसी नहीं होनी चाहिए?
प्रोफेसर अरुण कुमार, फाइनल वर्ड.
मैं एक सेंटेंस बोल सकता हूँ ओंकार जी को.
जी बिल्कुल. And then
आपने बहुत महत्वपूर्ण सवाल उठाया. You've asked a very important question. But there are only one or two people who have the answers to the question. Not me or Professor Arun Kumar. I think the only person who has the answer to this question is the most powerful person in this country. बस और कुछ नहीं कहना चाहता हूँ.
Professor Arun Kumar.
Very quickly, the rise in the stock market, while the economy was down during the pandemic, when the rate of growth had plummeted, was entirely because demand was being shifted from the unorganized sector to the organized sector. If you look at the data from the RBI for last year, the sample size is 2,700 stock market companies, which are non-financial, non-public sector. Their sales grew by 41%, their profit grew by 24%. When the economy is stagnant, it can only be at the expense of the unorganized sector, which was declining. And therefore, these companies, the organized sector, their pricing power had risen. They increased their prices during the period when things were going bad for the rest of the country. And that's how it rose. Secondly, the money was moving into the stock market through mutual funds and so on, because the interest rate in the banks had come down very sharply. So adjusted for inflation, the stock market was giving good returns. Thirdly, the technology stocks in the US were doing very well. And the technology stocks, the technology companies were investing in the technology stocks in India. So for instance, Reliance, because of the Jio, which was the most indebted company in February 2020, became completely debt-free by August 2020. So therefore, the money was moving in from Google and Facebook and all of them because they thought they could take advantage of Jio. This rise in the stock market for technology companies also boosted other companies because the sentiment rose, and then more funds came in from abroad. So these are some of the reasons why, in spite of the fact that the country was doing very poorly, the economy was doing poorly, the stock market was rising, and therefore the wealth of the corporates was rising. And I would say that the wealth in the stock market is probably owned by 0.1% of India. The corporate sector is no more than 0.1%. There are 6,000 companies that are listed in the stock market. 3,000 are traded actively in the stock market, and that stock is owned very narrowly. And they are the ones who are actually manipulating the stock market very substantially. That was, and the question about JPC earlier and what about now? I don't think the government would allow a JPC to take place because they would not want these questions to be opened up. And there are enough questions in the mind of the public. So I think the government would avoid a JPC. Supreme Court monitored inquiry may probably be a better one because, the JPC would be dominated by the BJP since it has a large majority in the Lok Sabha. And therefore, just like the earlier JPCs, if you go back to the 1993 JPC, go back to the later JPCs, nothing much actually came out. Even the exposes that came out of those really did not go far enough to reform the system. So I think a court-monitored inquiry is something that perhaps would be better. Hopefully, there'd be independent-minded judges who'd be there, who'd actually steer it, and then we would get something out. Yeah. Finally, I would say, to the question about what needs to be done, I think workers and farmers, need to put pressure again. The pressure that was brought about during the farm bill agitation, that kind of pressure is the only thing that the politicians will react to. So if the general public gets aware of the issues, I think the BJP's attempt would be to prevent the public from getting to know the issues, the deeper issues that are underlying. And those are the farmer leaders who understand this. I think they have to go and create a unity of the farmers and the workers and try and educate the public about it. Then only perhaps the political pressure would build up for reform of the system.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Arun Kumar. Thank you, Paranjoy ji. Thank you so much. And
I want to thank I want to thank everybody here. I'm so happy. Yes. I see Admiral Ramdas. I see
Deepanshu, can we take the last question from Joy, if it's fine with you?
No, it's fine with me. But Joy, please go ahead. It's always fine with me. Yeah, go ahead, Joy.
No, I'm just listening this thing and noting down stuff. I have no question.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
You had raised your hand.
Yeah. Thank you. So I'll give the floor to Shabnamji. Shabnamji, final words. And I also want to thank everyone for participating and asking some excellent questions. I mean, this was, you did my job far easier by just asking, I think, a diverse range of questions around, from the economy to farmers to workers to the stock market, banks, exposure, everything. So it was truly an insightful and fascinating dialogue. Thank you, Shabnamji, for organizing this, and thanks to Anand. Please go ahead, ma'am. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, all of you. Dr. Deepanshu, Mohan, Paranjoy, and Professor Dr. Arun Kumar. And thank you everyone who came and attended. It was a very vibrant discussion. And I hope that some of the questions have been answered, if not all. I have shared the email IDs of all the two speakers in the chair. In case you have any pending questions, you can write to them. I'm sure they would find time to reply to you. And Anhad was missing for the last 2-3 months. We usually do these webinars very regularly, but because of some of the cases and inquiries that we are also fighting and facing, it became a bit difficult to handle everything together. But we would be doing webinars on various issues which are facing the country right now. Anhad is also completing 20 years on 6th of March. So we are planning a series of webinars for that. We would have done physical programs, but unfortunately, we have no resources. But thanks to Zoom, we are able to connect with each other. So thank you very much. And those of you who have shared the email IDs, we would send you the link to the YouTube. By Monday, we will upload this discussion on YouTube channel, and you can have a look at it. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Shabnam, and bye to everybody.
Shabnam. Thank you, Anhad.
Thank you. Yeah. अगर आप में से किसी को अपना ईमेल आईडी वगैरह डालना हो, अभी ये खुला है कुछ देर. We'll be in touch with you.
परंजॉय और प्रोफेसर अरुण कुमार दोनों का बेहद शुक्रिया. मेरे जैसा
धन्यवाद गौहर. Thanks a lot.
Redif की spelling RADIFFMAI.
Thank you, Professor Arun Kumar sir and Paranjoy sir, for giving us a great opportunity to get the knowledge about the things happening in our country. Thanks a lot. I'm waiting for a lot of sessions to go.
Xiaomi में बैक उल्टा रहता है ना? Xiaomi में बैक इधर रहता है, जनरली इधर रहता है. स्विचेस चाहिए तो सिर्फ जवाहर ट्रेडिंग कंपनी आई है. हैवेल्स की प्रोडक्ट्स का सबसे बड़ा शोरूम अग्रसेन स्क्वायर गांधी बाग.
अशोक गडकरी जी का हाथ ऊपर है, लेकिन अब स्पीकर जा चुके हैं.
इधर ये बटन नहीं है, वो ये है ना बैटरी से भाई जैसा उसको खत्म हो गया पूरा बैटरी.
Thank you very much. I'll be closing the Zoom now. I've copied all the. अगर और किसी को नहीं अभी लिखना है अपना ईमेल आईडी तो. So people are still writing.